Thank you very much. It's 9:30. We are live from the Intercontinental Hotel in Paris, and we're now going to talk about the marketing of sustainable finance products with SFDR and MIFAR. We have a lot of acronyms to cover. We'll be discussing this with Chloé Abdesater, hope I pronounced it right, in charge of sustainable finance at AMF, Asset Management Department. We also have Laure Delahousse, General Manager of AFG, Guillaume David, a member of the board at Archaea Investment Services, Mathilde Dufour, good morning, Head of Sustainable Development at Mirova, and Dimitri Sakis, Group Head of Operational Line of Distribution Services and ETF services at KCS. Good morning, all. Let's start with Mathilde. We mentioned this in our introduction with Philippe Setbon. The regulations are very complex, and especially the SFDR regulation. It's hard to classify funds under Article 6, 8, and 9. What is your viewpoint as a committed management company? Good morning. Very good opening question for our panel discussion. Our point of view is that this regulation came out 18 months ago or more. Time flies. Remember, the initial goal was to avoid greenwashing, but also classify funds according to sustainability. What is patent now is that we have lost that aspect somewhat. As an asset management company, when the regulation came out, we were very happy because these are topics we had been dealing with at Mirova for more than 10 years. So we were happy to see funds classified, ESG funds classified according to sustainability. But what happened between the start and implementation, different clarifications from lawmakers made it move to a labeling system, pretty much, even though it wasn't the initial objective, so we don't have all the instructions that should go with that. So what's a sustainable investment is the first question. That's still not clarified. So what explains the reclassifications we're seeing, even declassifications, but is what we hear about, but it's mostly readjustments. We're seeing a gap between the initial objective and the way the market is using this system, and it's confusing things. Not going into too much detail. What we're seeing and what we chose to do in Mirova is to say we have an uncertain environment we're working with. It's still important to keep the classification system with 6, 8, and 9 that remain relevant. The rules are becoming so strict according to Articles 9. The risk is we are going to have a market that is filled with Articles 9. So we want to push a definition that's of sustainable environment that's robust, even though it's still fuzzy, so we can create funds that are sustainable. Dimitri Sakis, what do you say about reclassification? Good morning, all. Yes, we have seen this reclassification. As service providers, what we are seeing, some of our asset management companies that we've been working on have to deal with reclassification, but we don't see it as a reclassification as much as reconsideration to have a more cautious approach to Articles 8 and 9. It's important we go through this transition together properly, and we get classified under Article 9. If we don't meet the objectives of Article 9, for the world of finance would not be productive for the world of finance, and it would lead to disappointments. In some articles, they talk about disappointments or letdowns. I think it's a more cautious approach myself. You mentioned data. We have to pay close attention to all of these aspects. The data has to be relevant as part of the regulation. And it is important today to remain aware, and everyone is aware, that the data is not fully reliable yet as part of the regulation, and the regulation as such. So having a reconsideration of Article 9 towards Article 8 is very beneficial for everyone. It's going to allow all of us to go through the transition more easily, serenely. We don't know where we stand. We don't know where we're heading. We are building the future, and in that context, it's more cautious to reconsider it. We'll come back to the subject of data, but I'd like to hear from Chloe Abdis-Sutter. What do the lawmakers think? I agree with the recategorization, and it's due to the fuzzy and complex aspects of regulations on sustainable financing in terms of scheduling or requirements, which may seem sometimes illogical, but unfortunately that's the regulations we're working with right now, and there's a lot of attention from the part of ESMA or the European regulation or NGOs or journalists. You have to abide by the regulation for now, and as supervisors we have to supervise. Now the idea is not to leave you all alone with this. At AMF we want to provide support and guidance. This is important for us. We want to help explain things without making it more complex. But when the laws and regulations are clear, you apply them as such. So these texts are fuzzy and complex, and that's why we've seen this recategorization, reclassification. And also the stock market took it as a label, but it's not meant to be a label. So we really want to encourage you to be cautious. Article 9, this quarter, we should be getting answers from the European Commission that's going to publish things, giving us more explanations on Article 9 and sustainable finance. So it's a moving field, moving target. So stay open to what's to come. It's not done yet. Right. We've been talking about the SFDR regulation, but we also have MiFID ESG, which is affecting investors, yes, and investment advisors. Since August 2, they have to start asking questions about sustainability criteria, and they are linked up to the SFDR taxonomy. These are complex issues. How do you explain to your customer what the taxonomy or sustainable development definitions are when we don't even fully understand? So we have to get into marching order, especially with the ESMA sustainability guidelines, which are to come into effect by August or September 2023, 6 months after the translation. So we have to educate clients and advisors who have to be comfortable in presenting these concepts. Yes, that's what Philippe Sedbon said. This is key, paramount, yes, so that there's a real dialogue and clients can express their preferences clearly. We shouldn't wait until the ESMA guidelines come into effect. You have to plan ahead and anticipate. And when you start working on this, we at AMF are here to support you. If you run into trouble, let us know, because we can also bring these up to the European level to get clarifications. Thank you, Guillaume. David, we shouldn't wait. What do you say? To come back to recategorization, the first point for retailers, it's been complex for us as a management company. We all understand Article 6 don't include ESG, Article 8 somewhat, and Article 9 is a reinforced integration. But we now know it's more complex than that. But also, the retailers heard this and it gave us a simple view of things. People wonder what happened to Article 9, but we all understood what Articles 6, 8, 9 were about. We knew that there was a ramp-up. If we come back to MIF, it had a big impact on retailers. Initially, on sales directors and top managers who had to find out about new terminologies like negative incidents, such as do you have a lack of diversity or are there greenhouse gas GHG emissions? And then there's taxonomy. People understand how to do with the environment, and then you explain to them that CSR2 is not in effect yet. And then there's the percentage of sustainable investment. And they understand that the calculation formulas differ from one company to another. And now the European ESG templates are trying to work on these percentages, which are open architecture. And the advisors and customers are working on this. You see, with a lot of advisors, savings products is only part of all the financial products they sell. So this adds an additional process to their sales. So what's a problem is that sales advisors are pragmatic, and the more stringent we are in our sustainable investment questionnaires, the more it's going to restrict the sale. Look at it. Think of a web client. They're going to have to fill out a questionnaire online. And of course, most of us would rather invest in things that are positive for the planet and society and humans. But it trickles down to something very restrictive. And a few years ago, we were only asked about ESG and performance. And I think things are a little better now, even though 2022 was not the best year for ESG products versus armament or oil. But now we're talking about ESG and diversification. We should work on this with AMF. Thank you. You mentioned how investors need to fill out a questionnaire. Did we talk about the labeling effect, Laure Delahousse? Will that make things simpler? You said we've been saying it's been making things more complex. Well, let me take a step back and come and talk about Philippe Sedbon's introduction as the vision to a transition to a new a business model. And now we've been talking about all the regulatory details and the gap between this lofty vision vision and a transition to a new, a greener business model with trying to work out the details of the regulation on a daily basis, which is very hard to understand indeed. We should not stop at being passive and trying to break down definitions. We shouldn't forget the vision. At AFG, we try to ask questions to ESMA and European Commission, but also as French people, we're trying to plan ahead. We've been working on this for 20 years, these questions of sustainable finance. When we want to push our vision through a practical experience of funding the transition to sustainable investment. And this is where we sort of just do what Philippe mentioned earlier, to try and support a definition brings together all players, all stakeholders, giving broad guidelines of sustainable finance. It's important because we're talking about retail here. And if we want to get our clients on board in our vision and how we fund the transition to the new business model, we have to be clear about the data, clear about the objectives, and to avoid claims or accusations of greenwashing, which are not justified because, you see, in sustainable funds, are very broad strategies that are not well understood by clients or even by retailers themselves, the people selling them themselves, because they are caught up in all of these concepts moving forward and backwards, and people are lost. So going back to your question about labeling. When you look at sustainable finance with a broad view, we started with transparency. We asked all responsible funds to have a transparency code at AFG, and then there was the labels and then the regulation. And now we have to make it all compatible. There were labels, there was the AMF doctrine. We worked a lot on with AMF, and now the European regulation comes into play. With a history of sustainable and responsible investment in France, which has been based on best in class, and it comes up against European concepts that are not necessarily in line with our concepts. So we've been here to identify sustainable funds. We're seeing we're moving from a first version to a second and third versions, and we have to make it all consistent with the regulation. We can't have two different approaches, and it's a challenge. And to conclude with this, the issue is timing. We started with finance before issuers. So finance was to invest from data it didn't always have, imperfect data from companies and governments that are not on the same timeline, and then MIF ESG coming into effect this summer when definitions aren't clarified. So we're trying to go fast, perhaps too fast, or we should have started earlier, perhaps, but it's all coming into play at the same time, and it's going to take a bit of time, and we have to be clear to avoid a pileup. We ask management companies to be accountable before they even have the data from issuers. Mathilde Dufour. Data is central to this. We have many different sources of data, and there are different sources. We need harmonization. What do you do? Data has been a central topic for ESG for more than 10 years. What's important in my opinion is to keep in mind that you'll never have the perfect data. These topics are by nature quite varied. Social aspects rely on standards rather than on science, with a part of subjectivity we have to work with. We're at a point in time where we're developing data standards in Europe or more internationally with IISB. And we're going to have more standardization. It's going to be useful for people like us. There's an issue about having ESG data providers that are more diversified. What's important for us is that data is important, it's useful, and the more formalized, the better. And I'm in charge of research team, so I can tell you we'll always need human expertise and fine understanding, which we work with today. So data is important. Well, we have quite a few years ahead before we have data that's stable and international enough, and a concrete field-based approach. Guillaume, David, how do you converge the sources? From the retail viewpoint, it remains complicated for clients. In the pre-contract document, in the prospectus or KID, there are different commitments as to SFTR, taxonomy, etc. And in the end, the periodical report is something they'll get as part of with the annual report a year later. In practice, management companies' reports don't cover the data the client's committed to. They report on extra-financial ESG data, big supplies like Sustainethics and others. One first gap, there is low correlation of the different ratings of the different management companies. They're talking about a 0.54 correlation on extra-financial scores, and on financial scores, the correlation is higher than 0.9. That's tangible data. We have different sorts of data, and reporting for the final clients don't show the same data. So it's complicated for clients. We're talking about labels. At Archaea, we consider that the label has the merit of being provided by a third party rather than through statements like SFTR. And it was simple for clients. Either you had a label or you didn't. So clients didn't have to read the whole report. But now with the new data, you can have a fund with a label and a good SFTR percentage, but not aligned with the taxonomy. So we're going to be offering things that are hard to understand. And Dimitri, back to you. We've mentioned this. Should we not have European, at least, mobilization to harmonize the framework? Right, we're seeing a lot of some big American companies buying European companies like Vigeo, for instance, which was bought out. Once again, as service providers, we have different issues. We're part of the ecosystem, but we have different views. We support our clients, the management companies, and what's important for us is to try and select European companies we believe in terms of data. We worked in partnership with a company we believe in, a European company with data. and they work using artificial intelligence. What's important in this company, I believe in, is the basic analysis of management company needs to remain important. The basic analysis that says we have to be close to the companies to understand the companies we invest in, to really understand the impact, so we can invest in them. And these companies we partner up with also work on this second aspect, not just all the collected data, but also basic aspects. We have to underline this as service providers so we can have a panel of companies that can compete with the big data providers. Thanks. We spoke about AI on the field, the ground, it adds another dimension to the approach to data. Laure Delahousse, you mentioned this. We need regulation beyond processes, and we need this to apply to sources of data. The regulation is coming. We were very happy to see EFRAG work on this, on the initiative of the European Commission to harmonize the issuers' reporting. We can provide management for and support companies towards the proper transition only if we have the right data. We need to understand the carbon trajectory, among other things. So harmonization is great news here. And then we have to see how it coordinates with international standards. The EU is not alone. There's also the works of IISB. Once that's done, it'll be a great step forward. And the DISA project that gives direct access to the gross data from issuers is also great news. The data is going to be even richer and more harmonized, which is good news. But we need the means and resources to analyze the data and the knowledge of the field that Mathilde mentioned. As a management company, we need to make up our minds about the companies. It's difficult here with the retail meeting. We have to translate all the data into data that clients can understand, so they can understand the fund strategy and how through the funds reporting it's made understandable. So we select the most relevant data for clients. And we have to educate, explain. That's a lot of work for advisors. Advisors in the networks have a key role to play. So having a best-in-class strategy for labels and an impact fund or green fund, funding transition, these are different things. They shouldn't be surprised to see 2% of the fund invested in the green European taxonomy because it's only a few percentage points of economic activity in Europe. So you have to remember all these concepts and select just the most relevant data, because without clients we won't be able to fund the transition. So it's going to take time still. A word from the regulator, the lawmaker, Chloe, to conclude about regulation and the need for regulation and the timeline. Yeah, well, the timeline is not quite right. It's complex. We have to get into marching order, and we need to control things, check things. We understand it's complicated, but we can't wait for everything to be settled. We have to plan ahead. And please come to us if you have any questions. Don't take the risk of being non-compliant. In 2023, you're going to get checked on SFDR, level 2, which came into effect on January 1st. Towards the end of 2023, you're going to be checked for compliance with SFDR. So things are moving forward fast. It's an important regulation, even though it still can be improved. Since it's coming from European level, we have to implement it and comply with it. So we encourage all players to be cautious, to think ahead, to think long term, and make sure that they're compliant, because it can have a negative impact when you undergo controls. Right. You have to be cautious and plan ahead. And I think it's also the role of all stakeholders, national authorities, to let the European level know how difficult it is for stakeholders now. Because you can't go and check companies on these concepts that they don't understand. So you really need to let the European level know about your difficulties on the ground.
This is what we're trying to do, and that's why we're highly interested in feedback experience and professional associations. We're highly focused on this point, and insofar as European control, I mean, things have already been enacted. We can actually communicate all the different difficulties and perhaps provide more flexibility and clarifications, but there are places which we have lesser control over and which we need to implement, but we're really trying to cherish this, and this is what we're doing. We're quite perfectly in line. Okay, I hear you. Education, teaching, intelligent control, or hopefully it is to make headway and really have this vision. And Philippe Sedbon really talked about guiding via asset management while guiding sustainable finance. Thanks to all 5 of you.
As sustainable investing becomes mainstream, there is now greater demand from investors for more clarity on the environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, aspects of their investments, as well as increased regulatory pressure for standard ESG reporting. Morningstar has listened to investors and carefully considered the industry's ESG investing needs. We've made significant investments to develop our data, research, ratings, and customized reporting solutions, so you can create best-in-class communications that distill the complexities of ESG into clean and clear visuals. Investors can quickly assess whether an investment or portfolio holdings are exposed to material ESG factors, controversial areas, or impacts to a cause, to build stronger portfolios for long-term growth. Morningstar is founded on empowering investor success.
Discover cases.
you.